Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. Now, my first guest this morning, Frank Garner. He is a very familiar face to people in Key West. He was the past chairman of the Art in Public Places Board. There's even a day in Key West named after him. Another thing about Frank is that he is living proof that long-term survival with HIV is possible. He tested positive 28 years ago. His mentality today, though, is to just stay positive, and his advice to those who are living with the disease is to live and be happy. Frank, it's such a pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Frank, I have to say that whenever I mention your name to people, they always have so many kind things to say about you. You are very respected, Frank.
Well, that's always good to hear.
Yeah, it's always good to hear. It's good things and not bad
Yes,
things, right?
yes.
All right, Frank. I mentioned that 28 years ago you received news that you did have HIV, and I can only imagine how hard of a time that was to receive the news.
It was very scary because I had friends, acquaintances that had been diagnosed who were dead or dying at an enormous pace. I mean, I was going to, excuse me, 4 or 5 memorial services or funerals a week.
A week?
A week.
I can't even imagine. And then to receive the news that you had it, what did they tell you when you received that news? How long did they say you would have?
They told me, I asked the guy, I said, what is the prognosis? And he said, well, at this point, probably a year.
A year?
A year.
Wow. And now here you are 28 years later, Frank.
Well, and, and there are plenty of people, not only here in Key West, but around the country, who, like me, are long-term survivors. Mm-hmm. In fact, we have a group here in Key West, a long-term survivors group. Mm-hmm. So I'm not unique.
Right, you're not alone. And that has to be encouraging too then, to have support of others, and I'm sure you're like the cheerleader of the group, Frank.
Not really, no.
Now, 28 years ago, were you living in Key West?
No, I was in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. And how did Key West come into your life then, Frank?
Well, I had a business in Washington, and it became a time where the economy was really, really bad. Mm-hmm. And in my business, we were more affected probably than anybody. So for a year, I went literally without any business at all. And my best friend, who is still my best friend, lived in Key West at that time. And I called him up and I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And he said, put everything in storage and just come down and you can spend the winter here and we'll go from there. Mm-hmm. So I did. I just left.
You left, you took that leap of faith, and here you are,
like
Frank.
many people,
Like many people, that's right.
This is the last stop.
Mm-hmm. And Frank, you really dove head into things. I mentioned that you were the chairman of the Art in Public Places Board, and I know that that's something that's really, really means a lot to you.
Well, my studies in college was art, and so that's one of my main, I love art. Mm-hmm. And back 2001 or whenever it started, Jimmy Weekly was mayor. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to start an Art in Public Places program here in Key West. And so he had each commissioner choose somebody to be on the board. And Jeremy Anthony, one of my wonderful friends, who is no longer with us, passed away from AIDS, chose me to be his representative to the board. And we spent a year putting it together, planning it, making the guidelines, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And there was even a day then named after you because of all the work you put into that. Frank, what day is it?
January the 16th, I believe.
Is national, right?
No, it's
Key West.
I don't
Frank
think I
Garner
don't.
Day.
School isn't closed that day, believe me.
Well, it should be, Frank. And now another thing that happened when you moved down to Key West is you found a lot of help through the organization AIDS Help.
I certainly did. The day I arrived, my wonderful friend Scott said to me, by the way, there's an organization called AIDS Help, and you need to go get enrolled in their program. At that time, they were out on Flagler in the old Catholic building out there. Mm-hmm. So I got on the bike and pedaled out to Flagler and went in and got did the intake, and they have been, I mean, just the caseworkers are incredibly wonderful there at AIDS Help. I've had several during those years, but all of them, I can't say enough good things about them. They work long hours. They go to all the fundraisers. You know, there's not a 9-to-5 job.
Right, right.
And the best thing I think about everybody, without exception, who works at AIDS Help, really cares. It's not just a job for them. They really care about their clients. And you feel that, you know that.
So that makes it so much better.
Oh, it's compared to some other places that I've visited, it's incredible.
Wonderful. Now, Frank, there's lots of fundraisers throughout the year for AIDS Help, and one of those fundraisers is actually something that you sponsor, and I want to talk about that before we go this morning. Tell us about your dinner that you put on.
Well, it's not a dinner. It's called Frank's Red Ribbon Holiday, and the way that started 4 years ago was the client committee. We were sitting there and they had announced that a lot of the food programs were going to be cut. And I got thinking, you know, I know people who have children, and what do they do? How do they manage? I can barely manage on what I get. And particularly, and it was around Christmas time, and I'm big on Christmas, because, you know, as a child, was fortunate enough, you know, my parents were wonderful. They gave us big Christmases. And I got thinking, you know, we need to do something for those children of people who are living with AIDS, because they're on very limited income. And I can't imagine, if I had a child, I don't know what I would do. So I just started this thing of like, bring toys in. And we started the first year we just collected toys. And then the next year we had a party and asked people at the party for donations. And then last year we had 19 children on the list. And I collected enough money to be able to give each child a $75 gift certificate to buy toys for Christmas.
That's wonderful.
So I call myself the skinniest Santa Claus in the world.
Well, I love it. And you're right, it is much more than a dinner. It's an event that really helps families and children. And Frank, we're running out of time this morning. But again, already, again, your advice for people who have the disease that you have, Frank, it's to live, to be happy,
well, people
stay
are
positive.
still being tested positive. And my advice for any young person is it's no longer a death sentence. There are medications. The doctors here are absolutely wonderful. So just keep a positive attitude. Do what the doctor says. Take your medication. Get enrolled in AHI, AIDS Help, because they will be a big help to you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again, Frank, for being with me this morning. I'm going to take a quick break right now. I'll be right back after these messages. There's much more to come. Stay with me.